The deep space monitoring station on Zalani Prime hummed with quiet activity. Technician Keth watched the screens with tired eyes. Another 12-hour shift was almost over. The same patterns, the same cosmic background radiation, the same empty space stretching endlessly in all directions. Then something changed. A blip appeared on his screen. Not the usual asteroid or space debris, but something different. Something organized. A signal. Keth straightened in his chair and called over his supervisor. "Senior Monitor Vex, I have something unusual here." Vex glided over on his 6 thin legs, his silver skin catching the blue light from the displays. Like all Zalani, he was tall and slender, with large, dark eyes that could see across many light spectrums. His species had ruled this part of the galaxy for thousands of years through superior technology and careful planning. "What is it?" Vex asked, leaning over the console. "A transmission, sir." "Electromagnetic waves. Very primitive format, but definitely artificial." Vex studied the readout. The signal was weak and broken, clearly traveling from very far away. "Can you decode it?" "Working on it now, sir." Keth's fingers moved quickly over his controls. The Zalani had technology that could break down almost any form of communication. Within minutes, he had results. "It appears to be a distress call, sir, from a species calling themselves humans. They claim to be from a planet called Earth." Vex examined the data more closely. The transmission was crude, using radio waves that the Zalani had stopped using millennia ago. "Where is this coming from?" "The outer rim of our galaxy, sir. Sector 7742. According to the signal degradation, this transmission is at least 43 years old." 43 years? Vex laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Then whoever sent this is long dead." "What does the message say?" Keth pulled up the translated text. "It says, 'This is Colony Ship Horizon. We have suffered critical system failures. Life support failing. Over 400,000 souls aboard. Requesting immediate assistance. We are stranded in the Kepler 442 system. Please, if anyone receives this, we are dying. Our children are dying. Please help us.'" Vex read through the message several more times. The words were emotional, desperate, so very primitive. 400,000? In one ship? That seems unlikely for such a backward species. "There are several more similar messages, sir, all from the same general area of space. They mention multiple colony ships, settlements on various planets. It appears they were attempting to spread across several star systems. With such primitive technology," Vex shook his head. "Impossible. They would never survive the journey. This is probably some kind of automated system still broadcasting after their extinction." Keth nodded. That made sense. The Zalani had studied many dead civilizations. Species often left behind automated systems that continued transmitting long after their creators were gone. It was actually quite common. "Should I report this to the science division, sir? They might want to study the linguistics." "File it in the Dead Civilization Archive," Vex said, already moving back to his own station. "Mark it as extinct species, primitive technology. No further investigation required. The science division has more important things to study than the death cries of some backward species that couldn't even achieve proper faster-than-light travel." Keth did as ordered, typing up a brief report. He assigned the signals a low-priority classification and moved the files to long-term storage. Just another extinct species among the thousands they had cataloged over the centuries. As he finished his shift and prepared to go home, Keth took one last look at the translated messages. The desperation in the words was clear, even across the vast distance of space and time. Somewhere out there, hundreds of thousands of beings had died alone in the dark, calling out for help that never came. He felt a brief moment of sadness, then dismissed it. That was simply how the universe worked. The strong survived and spread among the stars. The weak died and were forgotten. The Zalani had learned this lesson long ago, which was why they now controlled 17 star systems and commanded the respect of dozens of other species. These humans had clearly been weak. If they had been strong, they would have survived. 3 months later, the Zalani began their expansion into Sector 7742. The area was rich in rare minerals and perfect for establishing new mining colonies. The Science Council had approved the mission enthusiastically. Long-range scans showed no signs of intelligent life in the region. Admiral Nex commanded the expedition from his flagship, the Golden Dawn. His fleet consisted of 12 ships, including 3 massive colony vessels carrying millions of Zilani settlers. This would be their greatest expansion yet, claiming an entire sector for their empire. Begin scanning operations, Nex ordered as they entered the sector. I want detailed surveys of every planet and asteroid belt. Mark the best locations for mining operations and agricultural colonies. His crew worked efficiently. The Zilani were nothing if not thorough. They had perfected the art of expansion over thousands of years. Find empty space, survey the resources, establish colonies, and slowly spread their influence across the galaxy. The first day of surveys went perfectly. System after system showed rich deposits of metals and rare elements. Several planets had ideal conditions for Zilani habitation. It would be a profitable expansion indeed. On the second day, something changed. "Admiral," called out Navigator Zill from her station. "I'm reading artificial structures in the Kepler 442 system." Nex frowned. "Structures? What kind of structures?" "Large metallic objects, sir. They appear to be ships, but they're huge, much larger than anything in our database." Put it on the main screen. The image that appeared shocked everyone on the bridge. 3 enormous vessels hung in space around a yellow star. Each ship was at least 5 kilometers long, bristling with unknown technology. They were clearly artificial, clearly the product of an advanced civilization. "Run a full scan," Nex ordered. "I want to know everything about those ships." The results were disturbing. The vessels were constructed using advanced alloys and powered by fusion reactors. Their design was unknown, unlike anything in Zilani records. Most concerning of all, they appeared to be operational. "Sir," Zill said quietly, "these are not ancient ruins. Those ships are active. They're powered up and they're scanning us back." Before Nex could respond, his communications officer interrupted. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessels. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was deep and strong, speaking in a language the universal translator struggled with for a moment before finding patterns. "Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Chen of the Human Colonial Defense Force. You have entered human-protected space. State your intentions immediately." The silence on the Zilani bridge was complete. Human. The same species from the distress calls they had ignored 43 years ago. The species they had assumed was extinct. Admiral Nex found his voice. "This is Admiral Nex of the Zilani Imperial Fleet. We were not aware this space was claimed. We are conducting routine exploration." "Routine exploration?" The human voice carried a tone that made Nex's skin crawl. It was cold, controlled, but with something dangerous underneath. "Admiral Nex, our records show that your people received distress calls from this sector 43 years ago. Calls requesting assistance for dying colonists, yet you never responded. Why?" Nex felt his heart's racing. How could they possibly know about those old transmissions? We have no record of such communications. "Admiral, we have copies of the transmissions sent to your monitoring stations. We also have records showing they were received and filed. Do not lie to us." The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. Around Nex, his crew exchanged worried glances. This was not going according to any standard first contact protocol. "Perhaps there was some misunderstanding," Nex tried. "If your people needed assistance, we would certainly have 437,000 humans died on the colony ship Horizon." The voice cut him off. "Died calling for help while your people filed their messages under extinct species. No further investigation required. We know this because we accessed your databases 3 months ago." Nex felt his blood turn to ice. "Accessed our databases? That's impossible. Our security OS is inadequate. We've been studying you for some time, Admiral. Learning about your empire, your technology, your weaknesses. We wanted to understand the species that left our people to die in the dark." On the tactical display, more contacts appeared. Many more. Ships were decloaking all around the Zilani fleet. Not just the 3 massive vessels they had first detected, but dozens of smaller craft. All of them bore the same unknown design. "Admiral Chen," Nex said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Surely we can discuss this like civilized beings. If there was a misunderstanding in the past, there was no misunderstanding. Your people chose to let ours die. They chose to mark us as extinct rather than lift a finger to help. That choice has consequences." The human ships began moving, taking up positions around the Zilani fleet. Their formation was perfect, coordinated with a precision that spoke of extensive training and experience. "What do you want?" Nex asked. "Justice," came the reply, "for 437,000 souls who died alone in the dark. calling for help that never came. Justice for the children who starved while your peep. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the HCDF Retribution, watching the Zelani fleet through the main display. After 43 years of preparation, this moment had finally arrived. The aliens who had condemned hundreds of thousands of humans to death were now trapped in human space, surrounded by ships they had never imagined could exist. Status report, Chen ordered. All hunter squadrons in position. Admiral, reported Captain Martinez from the tactical station. The Zelani fleet is completely surrounded. 37 vessels total, including 3 colony ships carrying approximately 2 million civilians. Chen nodded. The humans had been watching the Zelani expansion for months, waiting for them to enter the Kepler sector. Every ship movement, every communication, every supply run had been monitored and analyzed. The Zelani thought they were the masters of space warfare, but they had never faced an enemy that had been studying them for decades. Admiral, came the voice of Communications Officer Torres. The Zelani commander is requesting permission to withdraw from the system. He says this was all a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Chen's voice was cold as space itself. Open a channel. The face that appeared on screen was typical Zelani. Tall, thin with large dark eyes and silver skin. Admiral Nex looked nervous, his elongated fingers tapping against his command chair. Admiral Chen, Nex began, surely we can resolve this peacefully. The Zelani Empire has no quarrel with your people. If there were past communication errors, we can certainly... Communication errors, Chen interrupted. Is that what you call leaving nearly 500,000 people to die? Your monitoring station received 17 separate distress calls from our colony ships. 17 desperate pleas for help, and your people filed them away like they were meaningless noise. On the bridge of the Golden Dawn, Admiral Nex felt sweat forming on his skin despite the cool temperature. The human admiral's words were like ice, but underneath was something far more dangerous. This was not anger. This was cold, calculated fury that had been building for decades. Admiral Chen, you must understand. The Zelani Empire receives thousands of signals from across the galaxy. We cannot possibly respond to every what? Every cry for help? Every plea from dying children? Chen's image leaned forward. Let me tell you about the colony ship Horizon, Admiral Nex. 437,000 men, women, and children. Engineers, teachers, doctors, farmers. Families who had traveled 22 years to reach their new home, only to have their life support systems fail. The humans had done their research well. Chen began reading from a file that should not have existed. Captain Sarah Kim, age 34, mother of 2. She recorded final messages for 12 hours as the oxygen ran out, begging anyone who might be listening to save her children. Dr. Marcus Webb, the chief medical officer, worked for 6 days straight, trying to keep the sick alive with no power for his equipment. Maria Santos, age 7, asked her mother why the nice aliens wouldn't come help them. Each name, each detail hit Admiral Nex like a physical blow. How could the humans know so much about events from 43 years ago? How could they have records that even the Zelani had lost? We preserved their final messages, Admiral, Chen continued. Every last word, every prayer, every plea, every moment of desperation. Would you like me to play them for you? That won't be necessary, Nex said quickly. Admiral Chen, the past cannot be changed. If the Zelani Empire failed to respond appropriately, perhaps we can make amends. Reparations, technology transfers, whatever your people require. What we require is justice. The word hung in space between the two fleets like a physical thing. On the Zelani bridge, Navigator Zill was studying the tactical displays with growing alarm. Admiral, she whispered to Nex, their ship formations, they're not standard military patterns. They're surrounding us in 3 dimensions with mathematical precision. And, sir, our sensors are having trouble getting clear readings on their vessels. Some kind of advanced stealth technology. Nex nodded grimly. These humans were not the primitive species the Zelani had assumed them to be. Whatever had happened in the last 43 years, humanity had not just survived their early disasters, they had learned from them and grown strong. Admiral Chen, Nex tried again. What exactly do you want from us? First, we want acknowledgement. The Zelani Empire will officially recognize its failure to render aid to dying humans and accept responsibility for their deaths. That could be arranged. Second, we want compensation. The families of the dead deserve more than empty words. Reasonable. The Empire has vast resources. Third, we want guarantees. This will never happen again. Not to humans, not to any species. Nex felt a slight relief. These demands, while difficult politically, were not impossible. Perhaps this situation could be resolved without bloodshed. But then Admiral Chen continued. And fourth, we want trials. War crimes tribunals for those responsible for the decision to ignore our distress calls. The Zalani Bridge fell silent. War crimes? For a decision made decades ago by officials who were probably dead, this was beyond anything the Empire could accept. Admiral Chen, you must be reasonable. The individuals involved in those decisions are no longer in positions of authority. Some are likely deceased. We cannot err. Senior Monitor Vex, currently serving at Deep Space Station 7. Technician Keth, now a department supervisor on Zalani Prime. Director Morn of the Science Division, who classified our distress calls as extinct species communications. All still alive. All still in government service. Admiral Nex felt his heart stop. The humans knew names. Specific individuals. They had investigated the Zalani government structure so thoroughly that they knew more about the Empire's personnel than many Zalani officials did. How do you have this information? Nex asked. We told you, Admiral. We've been studying your Empire for months. Your computer networks are not as secure as you believe. Your communications are not as private as you think. We know about your expansion plans, your military capabilities, your economic resources. We know which systems are defended and which are vulnerable. On the tactical display, more human ships were appearing, not decloaking this time, but arriving through what looked like jump points. They materialized out of empty space with technologies the Zalani had never seen before. Captain Martinez reported quietly to Admiral Chen. Destroyer squadrons Mercury and Phoenix have arrived. Battleship Group Titan is in position. The Zalani fleet is now outnumbered 4-1. Chen nodded but kept his eyes on the Zalani Admiral. You see, Admiral Nex, we have spent 43 years preparing for this moment. While your people thought we were extinct, we were building, learning, growing stronger. We studied your technology and surpassed it. We analyzed your tactics and countered them. We learned everything we could about the species that left our people to die. What do you want us to do? Nex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You have two choices. You can submit to justice willingly, turn over the war criminals, and accept the terms of reparation we will dictate. Or you can resist, and we will take what we want by force, and if we resist— Chen's smile was colder than deep space. Then you will discover why Earth is classified as a death world, Admiral. You will learn what happens when you threaten the children of a species that evolved fighting predators that could crush starships. You will understand why humans never ever abandon their own. Admiral Nex looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all staring at the tactical displays showing dozens of human warships in perfect attack formation, ships that had appeared out of nowhere with technology beyond Zalani understanding. I need to consult with my government, Nex said finally. Of course. But Admiral, while you're talking to your superiors, remember this. We know where every Zalani colony is located. We know which systems have military bases and which have only civilians. We know your trade routes, your supply lines, your diplomatic communications. We have been watching and learning for a very long time. The transmission ended, leaving the Zalani bridge in stunned silence. Sir? Navigator Zill said quietly. What are your orders? Admiral Nex stared at the human ship surrounding his fleet. 43 years ago, his people had made a decision that seemed logical at the time. They had dismissed a species they thought was too primitive to matter. They had filed away cries for help from dying aliens because responding would have been inconvenient. Now those same aliens had returned, no longer primitive, no longer weak, no longer begging for help. They had become something the Zalani Empire had never faced before, an enemy that had been planning its revenge for nearly half a century. Send a message to Zalani Prime, Nex ordered. Priority 1 emergency classification. Tell them the humans are not extinct. Tell them they are here. They are powerful and they remember everything. As his communications officer worked to send the message, Admiral Nex wondered if it would reach home in time to matter. The humans had been planning this encounter for decades. They knew things about the Zalani Empire that should have been impossible to discover. They had surrounded a superior fleet with ease and spoke of justice with the confidence of those who held all the advantages. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Nex began to suspect that the Zalani Empire might have finally encountered an enemy it could not defeat. 3 days passed in tense negotiations between the human and Zalani fleets. During that time, Admiral Chen allowed carefully selected Zilani officials to tour one of the human medical ships. What they saw there changed everything. Dr. Yara Okafor, the chief medical officer of the HCDF Mercy, led the Zilani delegation through corridors lined with memorial walls. Each wall contained thousands of names, dates, and personal information. "These are the dead from the colony ship Horizon," Dr. Okafor explained, as the Zilani officials walked past in stunned silence. 437,215 individuals. We have complete records for each one. Dr. Kyle, the Zilani delegation's medical expert, stopped before one section of the wall. The names were small, the ages even smaller. "These are children," he said quietly. 86,412 children under the age of 16, Dr. Okafor confirmed. The youngest was 3 months old. Baby Marcus Chen, yes, Admiral Chen's great-niece. She died on day 14 of the crisis, when the ship's life support finally failed completely. The revelation hit the Zilani like a physical blow. No wonder the human admiral's fury was so cold and controlled. This was personal for him. Dr. Okafor continued the tour, showing them medical bay after medical bay filled with sophisticated equipment. We learned much from the tragedy of the Horizon. Modern human colony ships have triple redundancy on all life support systems. We carry medical facilities that can perform any operation known to galactic science. We never again want to lose people to preventable disasters. But how did you survive? Asked Scientist Jen, the delegation's technology expert. Our records show that your species had only primitive faster-than-light capability 43 years ago. How did you build all of this? Dr. Okafor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Necessity is a powerful teacher. When you know that help will never come, you learn to save yourself. When you discover that other species will watch your children die rather than make an effort to help, you become very motivated to never be helpless again. She led them to an observation deck where they could see the human fleet in all its glory. Dozens of ships hung in perfect formation, each one larger and more advanced than anything in the Zilani database. The colony ship Horizon was not the only disaster we faced in those early years, Dr. Okafor explained. There were equipment failures, alien diseases, hostile environments that killed thousands more. Each time we called for help from the advanced species, we knew were listening. Each time we were ignored. The Zilani were not the only ones who received our distress calls, she continued. The Gorvani Empire heard us when a plague struck New Terra Colony. 58,000 dead while they debated whether it was worth sending medical supplies. The Thulan Federation listened to our calls when the mining station at Asteroid Belt 7 suffered life support failure. 12,000 miners died in the dark while they decided our species was too primitive to bother with. The Zilani delegation exchanged worried glances. They had assumed they were dealing with human anger over a single incident. But this sounded like something much larger and more dangerous. How many incidents were there? Dr. Kyle asked. 17 major disasters in the first 20 years of human expansion, over 2 million dead total, all while advanced alien civilizations listened to our calls for help and decided we weren't worth saving. Dr. Okafor turned to face the delegation directly. Do you know what that teaches a species? It teaches them that they can only count on themselves. It teaches them that the galaxy is full of civilizations that will watch you die, rather than inconvenience themselves to help. It teaches them to become strong enough that they never need to ask for help again. She gestured toward the human fleet. Every ship you see out there exists because of the people who died calling for help that never came. Every weapon, every shield, every piece of technology was built by a species that learned it could only survive by becoming stronger than anyone who might threaten it. The tour continued to the ship's strategic planning center, where massive displays showed detailed information about dozens of alien civilizations. The Zilani were shocked to see how much the humans knew about them. We have been studying you for 32 years, explained Commander Sarah Kim, the ship's intelligence officer and daughter of the captain Sarah Kim, who had died on the Horizon. Not just the Zilani, but every species that ignored our distress calls. We know your military capabilities, your economic systems, your political structures, your weaknesses. The displays showed shipping routes, military bases, resource production facilities, and population centers throughout Zilani space. The level of detail was staggering. This is impossible, breathed Scientist Jen. Our security systems should have prevented this kind of intelligence gathering. Your security systems were designed to stop other Zilani or similar species Commander Kim replied. They were not designed to stop humans. We think differently. We approach problems from angles you never considered. We had 43 years to study your technology and learn how to defeat it. She pulled up another display showing human expansion over the past 4 decades. What the Zilani saw made their blood run cold. While you thought we were extinct, we were building the largest military force this galaxy has ever seen. We established colonies in over 200 systems. We developed technologies you cannot imagine. We prepared for the day when we would face the species that left our people to die. Admiral Nex, who had been silent throughout most of the tour, finally spoke. This is madness. You're talking about a war that could destroy entire civilizations. Surely your people don't want that. Commander Kim's expression hardened. Our people want justice. For 2 million dead who called out for help and received only silence. For children who died alone in the dark while advanced aliens filed their death cries under extinct species communications. She showed them one final display. Casualty projections for a full-scale war between humans and the various alien empires. The numbers were horrifying. These are our estimates for total casualties if we have to take justice by force, Kim explained. 47 billion deaths across 17 different civilizations. Entire star systems reduced to rubble. Economic collapse that could last for centuries. Dr. Kyle stared at the numbers in horror. You would kill billions for the sake of 2 million who died decades ago? We would prefer not to, Dr. Okafor answered. But we will if necessary. You see, those 2 million deaths taught us something very important about the galaxy. They taught us that species like yours see kindness as weakness. They taught us that mercy is interpreted as inability to strike back. They taught us that the only way to ensure our people are safe is to be so strong that no one would dare harm them. The tour ended in the ship's memorial chamber, where a single recording played on an endless loop. It was the voice of a young girl, clearly weak and struggling to breathe. Mama says the nice aliens will come help us soon. She says they have big ships and good medicine. I'm trying to be brave like she said, but I'm scared. It's getting hard to breathe. Please come soon, nice aliens. Please don't let us die. The recording was from Maria Santos, age 7, who had died on the colony ship Horizon. Her voice filled the chamber as the Zilani delegation stood in stunned silence. We play that recording once every day, Dr. Okafor said quietly, to remind ourselves why we do what we do. To remember that while alien civilizations debated whether we were worth saving, our children died hoping for help that never came. When the tour was over, the Zilani delegation was returned to their ship. Admiral Nex immediately called a conference with his senior officers. Recommendations, he asked bluntly. Sir, they're not bluffing about their military capabilities, reported Captain Dex, his tactical officer. The technology we've seen is at least 50 years ahead of anything we have. Their ships can appear and disappear at will. Their weapon systems are completely unknown to us. More importantly, added Dr. Kyle, they have the moral high ground. Every species in the galaxy will have heard similar distress calls at some point. When word of this gets out, many civilizations will side with the humans rather than risk being accused of similar callousness. Navigator Zill brought up the strategic displays. Sir, if their intelligence about our empire is accurate, and I believe it is, then resistance would be suicide. They know exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. Admiral Nex studied the faces of his officers. They were afraid, and they had every right to be. The Zilani had always prided themselves on being logical, calculating beings who made decisions based on careful analysis. The analysis now was clear. What are our options? Nex asked. We can surrender unconditionally and hope for mercy, Captain Dex said. We can try to negotiate limited terms, or we can fight and face complete destruction. Sir, Dr. Kyle added quietly, there's one more thing. I don't think this is really about justice or revenge. I think this is about ensuring it never happens again. The humans have become strong enough to protect not just themselves but any species that might face similar disasters in the future. Admiral Nex considered this. It was possible that Dr. Kyle was right. The humans had suffered terribly in their early expansion years because no one would help them. Now they were powerful enough to ensure that no species would ever, again, have to watch their children die while calling for the negotiations. Lasted exactly 6 hours before Admiral Chen declared them over. Your terms are unacceptable. Admiral Nex had said, his voice strained with desperation. The Zilani Empire cannot surrender our sovereignty to an alien tribunal. We cannot turn over government officials for trial by foreign courts. These demands are impossible. Admiral Chen had listened to 2 hours of Zilani protests, counteroffers, and attempts at compromise. His response was simple and final. Then you have chosen war. The human fleet began moving before the transmission ended. Admiral Nex watched in horror as dozens of ships simply vanished from his sensors, while others took up attack positions with mathematical precision. How are they moving so fast? Demanded Captain Dex from the tactical station. Their acceleration curves are impossible. No known species can generate that kind of thrust without killing their crews. Dr. Kyle had been studying the human ships since the negotiations began. Captain, I don't think they're accelerating conventionally. I think they're manipulating space-time itself. Short-range teleportation or dimensional folding, technology we don't understand. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Chen stood calmly as his fleet prepared for battle. But this would not be a conventional war. The humans had spent 43 years planning for this moment, and they had learned that the galaxy respected only one thing: overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Initiate Operation Reaper, Chen ordered. Throughout human space, fleets that had been waiting in hidden positions began to move, not toward the Zilani fleet in the Kepler system, but toward strategic targets throughout the Zilani Empire. The war would not be fought where the Zilani expected. At the first strike hit the Zilani military headquarters, on Zilani Prime. Colonel Sarah Martinez materialized in the center of the command complex with her team of 50 Marines. Their personal teleportation devices allowed them to bypass every defensive system the Zilani had built. One moment the command center was secure, the next it was filled with armed humans. "Attention Zilani personnel," Martinez announced through the building's communication system. "This facility is now under human control. You will not be harmed if you surrender immediately. Resistance will be met with force." The Zilani guards reached for their weapons, but the humans moved with impossible speed. Their powered armor allowed them to cross the room in seconds, disarming the defenders before they could react. Within minutes, the most secure military facility in the Zilani Empire was under human control. But the real attack was not physical. It was digital. Human cyber warfare specialists had spent years mapping every computer network in Zilani space. Now they struck with the force of a digital hurricane. Every communication system, every database, every piece of electronic infrastructure was simultaneously compromised. On worlds throughout the Empire, Zilani citizens turned on their information displays to find human messages waiting for them. "Citizens of the Zilani Empire," the message began, accompanied by images of the dying colonists from the ship Horizon. "Your government has committed crimes against humanity. 43 years ago, they received distress calls from dying human colonists and chose to ignore them. 437,000 men, women, and children died while your officials filed their pleas for help under extinct species communications." The broadcast continued with documentation that should have been impossible to obtain. Personnel records, classified communications, internal memos discussing the decision to ignore human distress calls. Every piece of evidence was authentic, verified, and damning. "Your leaders chose to let our children die rather than inconvenience themselves to provide aid. Today, they have refused to accept responsibility for their crimes. Therefore, the Human Colonial Defense Force is taking direct action to ensure justice is served." But the psychological warfare was only the beginning. The real demonstration of human capabilities came at the Draconis military shipyard, the largest naval construction facility in Zilani space. Admiral Yex was inspecting the construction of a new battleship when every alarm in the facility began screaming. He rushed to the command center, demanding to know what was happening. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system," reported the facility's sensor operator. "Unknown ships are appearing everywhere. They're not decloaking. They're materializing out of nothing." On the display screens, Admiral Yex watched as human ships emerged from what looked like tiers in space itself. Dozens of vessels, each one larger and more advanced than anything in the Zilani fleet. "Battle stations," Yex ordered. "Launch all available fighters. Prepare defensive systems." The response was immediate and devastating. Human ships opened fire with weapons that defied understanding. Beams of energy that passed through shields like they didn't exist. Projectiles that curved around defensive barriers to strike their targets with perfect accuracy. Point defense systems that destroyed every incoming missile before it could travel 100 meters. In 12 minutes, the entire Zalani defensive fleet was either destroyed or disabled. The shipyard itself was left untouched, but every Zalani vessel in the system was reduced to floating debris. But the humans weren't finished. As Admiral Yex watched in stunned disbelief, human ships began deploying construction equipment. Not to destroy the shipyard, but to convert it. "What are they doing?" Yex asked in a whisper. His sensor operator checked the readings twice before answering. "Sir, they're upgrading the facility, adding new construction bays, installing unknown technology. They're taking over our shipyard and making it better." Within hours, the most advanced naval construction facility in Zalani space was producing human warships using techniques the Zalani couldn't comprehend. The pattern repeated across the Empire. Human forces struck with impossible speed and precision, not to destroy but to capture and convert. Military bases became human outposts. Communication networks became human information systems. Industrial facilities became production centers for human technology. The Zalani military tried to respond, but their forces seemed to move in slow motion compared to human capabilities. Every time they gathered ships for a counterattack, human forces appeared behind them, having somehow bypassed every sensor and defensive system. On Zalani Prime, government officials watched their empire crumble in real time. Systems they had controlled for centuries were falling to human forces so quickly that it was hard to track the losses. "How is this possible?" demanded Chancellor Crick as another star system reported human occupation. "Our intelligence said they had limited forces in this sector. Where are all these ships coming from?" Director Morn of the Science Division had been studying the human attacks for hours. His conclusion was terrifying. "Chancellor, I don't think they're coming from anywhere. I think they're being built on the spot. Every facility they capture becomes a production center for more human technology. They're not just defeating us, they're converting our own infrastructure to serve their purposes." The Chancellor stared at the strategic display. In less than 24 hours, the humans had captured or neutralized 30% of the Zalani Empire's military infrastructure. At this rate, the war would be over in days. "Contact Admiral Chen," Crix ordered. "Tell him we want to resume negotiations." But when the call went through, it wasn't Admiral Chen who answered. It was a human woman with cold, dark eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "This is Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding officer of the Human Colonial Defense Force. Admiral Chen is my father. He has been relieved of command for this operation." The implication was clear. The humans had put someone even more ruthless in charge of the war. "Admiral, the Zalani Empire wishes to discuss terms of surrender," Chancellor Crick said, trying to keep desperation out of his voice. "The time for negotiations has passed," Admiral Sarah Chen replied. "You had your chance to accept justice peacefully. You chose war. Now you will face the consequences of that choice. What do you want from us? Complete and unconditional surrender. Immediate cessation of all military activities. Full cooperation with human occupation forces. War crimes tribunals for all officials involved in the decision to ignore human distress calls. And if we refuse?" Admiral Sarah Chen's smile was colder than deep space. "Then we will demonstrate why Earth is classified as a death world, Chancellor. We will show you what happens when you threaten a species that learned to survive by becoming stronger than anything that might hunt them." The transmission ended, leaving the Zalani government to face the reality of their situation. In less than a day, the humans had crippled their military, captured their infrastructure, and turned their own technology against them. But the most terrifying aspect was the efficiency of it all. The humans weren't fighting with rage or passion. They were conducting a war with the cold precision of a species that had planned every detail for decades. Every move was calculated, every strike was measured, every decision was made with mathematical certainty. The Zalani had thought they were dealing with primitives seeking revenge. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. A species that had been forged in the fires of abandonment and had emerged Saint Help. 6 months after the fall of the Zalani Empire, the galaxy watched as something unprecedented took place on the neutral world of Sanctuary Station. For the first time in galactic history, an advanced alien civilization was being held accountable for war crimes by another species. The Great Hall of Justice had been constructed specifically for these trials. Representatives from 47 different civilizations sat in the observer galleries, watching as human prosecutors presented evidence against former Zilani officials. Judge Admiral Elena Rodriguez, a veteran of the early colony disasters, presided over the proceedings with calm authority. The humans had insisted on transparency. Every species in the galaxy would witness what happened when you abandoned dying children to preserve your own convenience. The court will now hear testimony in the case of the People versus Senior Monitor. Vex, Judge Rodriguez announced. The elderly Zilani official sat in the defendant's chair, his silver skin pale with fear. Beside him, his court-appointed defender, a human lawyer, prepared to argue for mercy. Prosecutor Captain James Wong rose to address the court. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Senior Monitor Vex received 17 separate distress calls from dying human colonists over a period of 6 months. In each case, he made the conscious decision to classify these calls as extinct species communications, rather than forward them to rescue services. Wong activated a holographic display that filled the center of the courtroom. The voices of the dying colonists echoed through the hall as their final messages played for all to hear. Please, if anyone can hear this, we have children aboard. Our life support is failing. We need immediate medical assistance. This is Captain Sarah Kim of the colony ship Horizon. Day 12 of the crisis. Oxygen levels critical. Please, we're dying here. The courtroom fell silent as the desperate pleas continued. In the observer galleries, representatives from dozens of alien civilizations shifted uncomfortably. Every species present had received similar calls at some point in their history. Every one of them had made similar decisions. To ignore the suffering of species they considered primitive or unimportant, the defense calls Dr. Nira Keth to testify, announced the human defense. Attorney Azalani medical expert took the stand. Sworn in according to human legal procedures that had been adapted for multi-species trials. Dr. Keth, in your expert opinion, could the Zilani Empire have saved the colonists on the ship Horizon? Yes, Dr. Keth answered quietly. A single medical ship could have reached them within 8 days. Our technology could have repaired their life support systems within hours of arrival. And the cost of such a rescue mission? Minimal. Perhaps 10,000 credits for fuel and supplies, less than the Empire spends on a single diplomatic dinner. The impact of that testimony rippled through the courtroom. 400,000 humans had died to save the Zilani government the cost of a diplomatic meal. Prosecutor Wong presented document after document showing the systematic nature of Zilani indifference. Internal memos discussing resource allocation, priorities, budget reports that listed alien rescue operations as non-essential expenditures, performance, evaluations that praised officials for efficient filtering of non-priority communications. Your Honor, Wong concluded, this was not a mistake or oversight. This was a deliberate policy of abandonment. The Zilani Empire chose to let human children die rather than spend the equivalent of pocket change on rescue operations. The trial continued for 3 weeks. Witness after witness testified about the human colonies that had called for help and received only silence. Alien medical experts confirmed that each disaster could have been prevented with minimal effort from any advanced civilization. But the most powerful testimony came from the humans themselves. Dr. Marcus Chen, now in his 70s, took the stand to speak about his infant daughter who had died on the Horizon. His voice never wavered as he described holding his baby girl as she struggled to breathe in the failing atmosphere. She was 3 months old. Dr. Chen said. She had never seen a sunrise or felt rain on her face. She died in the dark between the stars while alien civilizations decided she wasn't worth saving. Admiral Rodriguez listened to every word of testimony. As the daughter of colonists who had died in similar circumstances, she understood the weight of what was happening here. This trial wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about establishing a new principle for galactic civilization. When the evidence phase concluded, she called both sides to present their closing arguments. The defense attorney, despite being human, argued for mercy. Your Honor, Senior Monitor Vex was following established imperial policy. He had no authority to override centuries of Zilani tradition regarding contact with primitive species. While his actions resulted in tragedy, he cannot be held personally responsible for systemic failures. Prosecutor Wong's response was simple and direct. Your Honor, the defense would have us believe that following orders absolves one of moral responsibility. That institutional policy justifies abandoning dying children. The human species rejects this argument. We hold individuals accountable for their choices, regardless of what their superiors might have preferred. Judge Rodriguez took 3 days to consider her verdict. When court reconvened, the Great Hall was packed with representatives from across the galaxy. This court has listened to extensive testimony about the events surrounding the colony ship Horizon and 16 other human disasters, Rodriguez began. The evidence clearly shows that advanced alien civilizations, including the Zilani Empire, possess the technology and resources to prevent these tragedies. The evidence also shows that these civilizations chose not to act. She looked directly at Senior Monitor Vex. The defendant argues that he was following established policy. This court finds that argument insufficient. When faced with dying children, the only acceptable policy is to render aid immediately and discuss authorization later. This court finds Senior Monitor Vex guilty of war crimes through willful negligence resulting in mass casualties. However, considering his advanced age and his cooperation with these proceedings, the sentence will be limited to 10 years of community service aboard human hospital ships, providing medical aid to colonies in need. The sentence sent shockwaves through the galactic community, not because it was harsh, but because it established a precedent that would change everything. Alien officials could no longer hide behind institutional policy when faced with humanitarian crises. Over the following months, similar trials were held for officials from the Gorvani Empire, the Thulan Federation, and 6 other species that had ignored human distress calls. Each trial was broadcast throughout the galaxy, watched by billions of beings who were learning new concepts about moral responsibility. But the trials were only part of the human agenda for galactic reform. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Council, addressing the assembled representatives of 47 civilizations. The humans had requested a formal session to propose new universal laws regarding humanitarian aid. Distinguished representatives, Chen began, the human species has learned hard lessons about what happens when advanced civilizations ignore the suffering of their neighbors. We propose the establishment of the Galactic Humanitarian Accord, a binding agreement that requires all signatory species to render aid to any civilization in distress. The proposal was radical. It would require species to spend their own resources helping others, even aliens they had never met. Many representatives objected immediately. This is impractical, declared Ambassador Crix of the remaining Zilani government. The galaxy contains millions of species. We cannot possibly respond to every crisis. You can respond to the ones you're aware of, Chen replied calmly. The accord requires only that you help when you receive a direct distress call and have the capability to respond. Exactly what you could have done for our colonists 43 years ago. And if we refuse to sign? Asked the Gorvani representative. Admiral Chen's smile was cold but polite. Then you will discover that the human definition of distress call includes calls from species being threatened by non-signatory civilizations. We have a very strong military, and we've become quite good at rapid response operations. The implication was clear. Any species that refused to help others in need would find themselves facing human intervention if they ever threatened someone else. The debate continued for weeks, but the outcome was inevitable. The humans controlled the most advanced military force in the galaxy. More importantly, they had the moral authority that came from being the only species willing to hold others accountable for abandoning the helpless. One by one, the galactic civilizations signed the humanitarian accord. Some signed out of genuine conviction. Others signed because they feared human retaliation. But they all signed. The document established the Galactic Rescue Service, headquartered on the former Zilani world of New Sanctuary. Human-designed ships crewed by volunteers from dozens of species now patrolled space lanes, ready to respond to any distress call within hours. The old universe, where advanced species could ignore the suffering of primitives, was dead. In its place was something new, a galaxy where every civilization had a responsibility to help others in need,